Thank you all so much for tuning in today. I'm really excited to dive into this office hours, both to learn all about how to land an agent and a book deal, and also because a core goal of Dreamers and Doers is to amplify you and your journeys. And one of the ways we achieve this is by facilitating game-changing educational events such as this one that give us all the opportunity to up-level together. So before we officially begin, I want to share a bit of background information on our esteemed expert. This is a great bio, by the way. I was smiling reading it to myself earlier. Lindsay is a writer, businesswoman, and hopelessly hopeful romantic. After growing up in Michigan in the land of cows, cornfields, and kindness, she graduated from Dartmouth College. She was formerly a vice president at Goldman Sachs and has worked in both New York City and London. The Heart of the Deal is her first published novel, which will actually be released in just a couple of weeks. And sure, she's going to mention all these things in just a few moments. So I will hand it over to you, Lindsay. We're so excited to learn from your expertise today. Thank you for taking time, out of your launch schedule to facilitate this session for us. We are so grateful for your time.
Thank you so much, Hannah. And ladies, I'm so excited to be here. I was telling Hannah when we hopped on a few minutes early, it's so nice to kind of take a pause from the push and marketing stuff with the book and really feel like I can, take what I have learned and lift up this community, and has just been such a beautiful support system for me since I joined earlier this year. So today we'll go through the ins and outs of traditional publishing. We'll go through talking about how to get an agent and then land a book deal, and everything that I have learned over the past 10 years of going through the process to hopefully make your publishing journey a little bit smoother along the way. So I'm going to share my screen here and just go through a presentation. Okay, so just to get started, a little bit on my background, just to breeze through and augment what Hannah said about I studied economics and English and creative writing at Dartmouth. Then I worked at Goldman Sachs. While there, I was writing manuscripts and then landed a book deal for the completed manuscript, plus another one for another manuscript that's coming for a book that's coming out next year. So once I had the 2 book deals, I just said, okay, this is the time I'm taking the leap and pursuing full-time authorpreneurship, as I call it, and really approaching being an author as an entrepreneur and building a brand. So part of that has been giving a TEDx talk to establish myself as a voice in the business world and modern love, which is the themes of the book here, The Heart of the Deal. And so the first book's coming out in June, and then the next one is coming out next year. So looking at it, you might think, oh, wow, this seems like a really smooth, great journey for Lindsay, but that has not really been the case. And that's one of the reasons that I'm so excited to be talking to you all today, no matter what stage of the process you are at. If this is just kind of an idea or a little itch that maybe you'd want to publish a book someday, or if you're actually in the manuscript writing process, writing a proposal, pitching agents, whatever stage you're at, I really want to share the learnings, because I wrote my first manuscript when I was 18, and now a decade later and 5 unpublished books, here we are, and the first one is coming out. So we're going to go over today, first of all, kind of taking a moment to just understand your ambition for why you want to write a book and your motivation behind that. That can help keep you centered through the ups and downs. And then we'll talk about landing an agent, who kind of serve as the gatekeepers to traditional publishing, and then getting a book deal. So you have your agent, and then your agent goes and pitches basically the editors at the publishing houses. And the hope is that one or some of them make you an offer for a book deal. And then, and this is where I think the Dreamers and Doers community has such a leg up already from many authors and artists is really bringing this book to market as an entrepreneur and bringing our business skills and our scrappiness and our innovative thinking to what can be an old-fashioned industry. And that's something where I think that we'll do just really well together. And then it's kind of funny, I guess we're going to end with getting started. But once we go over the kind of the process, we'll really dial it back to say, okay, what does this really mean for how can you get started today to start reaching those dreams once we have a fuller picture of the whole process. And please, if you have any questions along the way, Hannah's going to help me monitor the chat. So please just drop them in as we go. And then at the end, we'll have a more formal Q&A, but don't hesitate to just kind of rapid fire and we'll answer them as we go. And that was the big moment of me opening my book box for the first time, which was very much a pinch me experience that I want you all to have. Okay, so the long and volatile author journey, a little bit of a finance volatility pun there, as also on the book cover, there is a stock market chart, which represents the ups and downs of love, the ups and downs of the New York City skyline, the ups and downs of friendships, and all of the to-dos about, I'll just, I guess, give a little preface on my background is in fiction. So this is a fictional love story and about a woman in business who is finding her way in New York and navigating all of the ups and downs and volatility of friendships, career, relationships in New York, kind of a time capsule of that season of my life, I guess. And, you know, parallel to the volatility in the plot of the book, my actual author journey and most people's has a ton of volatility with it. So all the ups and downs, many years go into it. So like I said, I wrote my first manuscript 10 years ago. I started pitching agents when I was 19 and really just kept learning and iterating and kind of balancing, taking feedback on board and pivoting while also staying true to what I felt I was kind of called to be writing. And just to put it in context a little bit, so 81% of Americans want to publish a book, and of people who finish their books or are working on them, only one in about 300,000 actually get a traditional publishing deal. So stats like that can seem a bit intimidating. And I should just mention, you know, self-publishing is also an increasingly attractive and can be successful avenue. Today, we're going to focus more on the traditional publishing route. What I was trying to optimize for was building my brand as a novelist and in more of the traditional publishing sphere. So that is kind of why I chose that path, but not to rule out or discredit anything with self-publishing. This is just my experience in the traditional publishing realm. So the odds don't look great on paper, but we can certainly do it. And we can do it together, there is just so much more strength in community, I think, as we all know. So first up, I want to talk about what is our motivation for writing a book? What are you optimizing for? So I think here's a little bit of wanting to distinguish and needing to distinguish between our ego and our business ambition. And what I mean by that is it's something I continually, even now, especially now, I'm grappling with as I think about bestseller lists and all this stuff. And it's like, okay, what part is my ego speaking? And then what part is saying, actually, yes, this book or this credential can really amplify and help me build my business and my brand and make the mark on the world that I feel like, I'm supposed to be making. And I think staying centered on whatever your motivation, think of it as even a one-line mission statement will really help bring clarity and purpose during the times that it does get hard or during the times when you just continually get rejections or no replies. I mean, for me, the hardest thing was even just getting agents to even look and read the full manuscript for many years. So I had to kind of keep coming back to why I was doing it. And then, in addition to that, really push yourself to articulate what you want to accomplish from having a book traditionally published. So is it credibility? Is it clients, PR, speaking opportunities, additional revenue streams? So today we'll be talking about both nonfiction and business books, as well as fiction and memoir. So wherever your ambition is for that, really understanding what outcome you want from it, and then making sure and kind of doing the double check that, okay, yes, a book is really the best or a great way to fill this gap that I feel like I have within my business, or to reach this required outcome. If we just want the book so we can say we're a published author, or, you know, post photos about it or whatever, that's going to feel very shallow as you continue to go and push through the grind. So that's, I guess, just a little bit of words of wisdom there. So for me personally, I have always felt like writing and creating have been a pillar of my calling, and really using words to dive into emotions of the human experience, to spread love and compassion in the world. And I think with how turbulent and heartbreaking as today's world can be, for me, like love stories and fiction can really put us in other people's shoes and spread compassion, and do that in a really powerful way. So that is why I think I have felt so called to keep going and pushing in writing novels. And then from a practical standpoint, I was really optimizing for credibility and reach for my first book. So I was not optimizing for economics nor speed to market. And by that, I mean, I wasn't thinking about, you know, if I wanted the highest royalties, I actually might have gone self-publishing. If I wanted the fastest book on the shelf, I also might have done self-publishing or a smaller indie press or something like that. So that was just for me kind of these, you can't have everything at once. And I made trade-offs, like my economics and terms are not great for my first book. And there are definitely kind of trade-offs along the way. But for me, I felt like just coming back to what are the one or two things that I'm prioritizing, and then being willing to compromise on some of the others. And remember that your book is really a stepping stone for this broader brand that you're building. So now it comes to landing an agent. And I'll quickly go over kind of the two main categories here, because it's a bit different with how you approach agents, whether you're writing nonfiction or business books. So if you're writing a how-to, or if you're writing, you know, a business book that is just more, that's less about, it's not memoir, it's just really kind of the practical ins and outs and tips for business people, etc. So this is interesting because you don't need to write the full book first. You can actually pitch on proposal. And this is usually about a 20 to 50 page business plan, essentially. So it includes your synopsis, it includes a couple of sample chapters, your marketing plan, your platform. And you basically put together this, again, I kind of think of it as your business plan for your book, to speak our language a little bit more. And then you summarize that proposal in a query letter that you email off to agents. Fiction, on the other hand, or memoir, fiction and memoir are categorized together unless you're super famous and Beyonce's writing a memoir, and then she would not need to write her full memoir before getting a book deal, but the rest of us do. So if you're thinking about fiction or memoir, then it really is much more about the writing. Agents don't care usually as much about seeing a proposal beforehand. They'll say, okay, great, but come back when it's fully written. So that is where you really dive in. You write, your 10 drafts on your own, you workshop it, you revise it, you get it as pristine and polished and finished as you feel like you can get it on your own and with your community. And then you start pitching agents. So what that means is you boil your whole 300 page, whatever page manuscript it is, down to one little page, actually one little, a couple little paragraphs, and we'll go over what the query letter is in more detail in a bit. But all to say that you essentially summarize what the manuscript is, what the hook is, and then you email agents. As far as, finding which agents would be good fits for your work, whether it's the nonfiction proposal that you're pitching or the full fiction or memoir manuscript, a good place to start is just the back of the acknowledgement section of any of either your favorite books or books that are aligned with the genre that you're writing in. So for example, in my acknowledgements, I have my agent and my editor top of the line, and that is really common. So when I kind of became a pro at online stalking and just coming up with all of these different agents. I would read their, interviews in Publisher Weekly. I would look at their websites. They all have kind of their own manuscript wish list, as it's called. If you're on Twitter, that's also the social platform that agents and editors love the most and are most active on. So they will, if you just look at hashtag MSWL, it stands for manuscript wish list, and you can also filter and see actually what agents are specifically looking for. And what that can help is not only target your query letter in the right direction, but you can also weave in why you're reaching out to that specific agent and what caught your attention about what they were looking for. Okay, so
quick question come through. For nonfiction, do you think the chapters need to be in chronological order, or can they be random chapter samples of a book idea?
They can definitely be random. I would heavily encourage chapter 1 being included in that, just to give that framing. And then I think it could be great. Say you have chapter 1, 5, and 12. If you think that those are a diverse representation that encapsulate the book, awesome. If you want to do 1, 2, and 3, that is probably okay as well. I would say think about the content of your book and where it's best expressed throughout, but don't forget chapter 1.
Awesome. And a kind of a follow-up to that, how many chapters did you say are needed?
For the proposal?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah. So usually about 2 to 4 chapters is what I've seen, and when I've worked with people, that's usually kind of the range, and call those, 6 to 10 pages per chapter-ish. And that really is just a way to, if they don't like your proposal, your chapter, they might not take a look at your chapters, but what you want to do is set yourself up for success, so that if an agent requests your proposal and they go through, they say, hey, this, marketing plan looks good. This platform looks great. This is an interesting angle for a topic that we haven't seen before, but, still fits within, kind of mainstream business, whatever it is. And then they can just quickly go to the chapters and really see evidence of that coming to life.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Hannah. So I guess diving in a little bit more on agents. Why do we need an agent? Do we need them, and why? I think the business person in me, and coming from Wall Street and also having more of this entrepreneurial spirit, my first thought was, why do I even need an agent? I can just do this myself, cut out the middleman. This is such an archaic, antiquated system that I need an agent to get seen by the publishers. Like, why don't I just go straight there? And I'll share a little bit of my experience doing that, but I will just say, kind of traditionally still, yes, having the agent is needed and is helpful with the traditional publishing industry. It is what I see as a legacy system that is ripe for disruption. And even some of our own Dreamers and Doers members I know are pursuing their own startups in the publishing space and really trying to bring innovation to this world. But it is not known for that. So the New York City publishing world is quite opposite to Silicon Valley startup land. And to an extent that can feel frustrating, that there are more of just these gatekeepers and processes you need to go through. And the long and short of it is that agents are really your ticket to getting seen by publishers. Additionally, they are your legal eyes and advocates, which I think is something to remember and not overlook as well, in that they really can make sure you're not getting ripped off in your contract rather than you paying a lawyer to do that. That said, nothing whatsoever is stopping you from bringing that Dreamers and Doers entrepreneurial spirit going directly to editors at publishing houses and charming them with your delightful ways and book. And I actually did this. I just reached out to editors at some of the top 10 houses in the US, seeing if they would take a look before I had an agent once my manuscript was fully complete. So basically I just sent them a similar type of query letter that I would send an agent and acknowledge that it was unconventional, but kind of just saying in the spirit of, would you be interested in taking a look? And I got a bite from a young editor at not one of the big 5, but the next level down and one of the top 10 in the US. She was this young, hungry editor, and she read my first 10 pages. She requested the full manuscript. She loved it. She brought it to her whole editorial team. They actually all loved it. I thought, wait, this is awesome. We're kind of sailing through. And at the last minute, it was nixed in the last round. They needed the sales and marketing sign off. And the director of sales was not convinced that the one-line hook, which we'll get to later, was quite sensational enough to stand out in the crowded market. So on the one hand, that was super frustrating to feel like I had gotten really close, and I thought this was kind of my big break after years of trying. But on the other hand, it gave me a lot of confidence, at least, that the book was being received by editors. So at that point, I decided, okay, I really do want an agent here so I can make sure that I'm being seen by the best editors and publishing houses and getting the best deal. And then even if I get the deal, I want to make sure that it's the right terms. And additionally, just having an extra editorial eye. My agent, I'm not actively in workshops anymore, even as I'm working on my next book, but my agent really is that person who just gives the best editorial feedback on it. So that is also something that I think I didn't quite appreciate at the time before having one. And I am glad that I do have an agent, but that's just a little bit more context for the somewhat old-fashioned structure. Okay, so getting an agent and enter the oh so fun query letter. So as I mentioned before, the query letter is really important, whether you are pitching the agents to look at your proposal or pitching them to look at your full manuscript. And at the bottom of this slide, and I'll just preface it now, really what your win is for the query letter is for the agent to get back and request the full proposal or request the first 50 pages or the full manuscript for fiction and memoir. From my many trials and errors, as we say, over the years, the 4 sections of a successful query letter, these are pretty conventional, but I've also honed them a bit just from my own experience. The first up is the hook. So this is that 1-sentence summary to catch attention. So be specific. Don't just say a woman, navigating love and relationships. Like, you want to get specific into the plot points, or, empowering women to be their best selves at work. Stay away from generic language like that and really lean into what makes your book specific and stand out. So also make sure to just do the basics, like include the genre right up front, memoir, business, contemporary fiction. And if it's fiction, you also might want to include the word count. If you just have a proposal, you could mention that you have a proposal, or you can do that at the end. They'll probably, be looking for that in business. So as far as the comps, the next section of the query letter, this is where, just as I used to work as an investor at Goldman, and of course we would kind of go through all of the comps for the companies that we were investing in. And I really see a lot of analogies between that and how we think about it in the book world as well, with just understanding where does this book, fit in the market? What is it like? And also, where does it stand out? So although it can feel a bit formulaic, the kind of X meets Y, like Uber meets, whatever it is of the startup pitch, kind of apply that to books just to help frame. And I, like, traditionally, maybe this is a little bit farther down, I find this really successful to be closer at the top, so that as the agent is looking at this query letter, and remember, they're only skimming, you're lucky to get the actual agent to see it. Most of the time it's their assistants. So make it as easy as possible for them to just place and say, oh yes, I know where this fits, or I see, how this is coming to life with what's already out there. And then number 3, the synopsis. So this is, a 1 paragraph, 200 word summary of the plot and content. Keep it simple. Again, agents are skimming these. Make your top points as easy to see as possible. For fiction, don't mention subplots, or don't include more than, 1 or 2 characters' names at the max. And this is really just in, it's kind of like the description on the back of this book, but even shorter. And it is really just the opportunity to whet the interest, to get the agent to ask for more. This is where I see a lot of authors struggle, and I work with authors on their query letters and things like that. And it's like, you know your book so well, or your proposal so well, and you really don't want to sell yourself short. So you want to go into all the details, but less really is more for the synopsis. Last up for the sections, we have the author bio and platform. So, think of that as, where you're establishing why you're the expert on the subject. It's specifically important for business books and nonfiction that you have a platform, or that you are an authoritative voice on this. So, think less about number of followers on social, and think more about why you are the right person to have authority on this subject. For fiction and memoir, the question is, why are you the best person to write this book? Platform and that sort of thing, visibility in the public sphere, usually matters less for fiction because it's more carried by the writing itself. Keep it under 400 words. That is my rule. Okay, so next up, what do you do when you have an offer of representation? So this is an exciting moment, and things to do include the happy dance, because yes, this is a really big step. I definitely squealed when I got my first offer. I actually had a few to choose from for this book, but prior to that, I hadn't gotten to this step. So this is what I found the hardest step. And then once you've calmed down from your happy dance, you want to ask the hard question. So ask the agent, how many books have you sold, to which publishers and imprints? When is the break clause in the contract? Or if they send over the author's agreement, as they call it, to review, just make sure that you are looking at it, share it with someone who has been through it, and really make sure that you're not just getting swept up in that emotional high, and that you're really doing your diligence. Communicate your short and long-term goals as an author. You can use the author as leverage with other agents, which is ultimately what I did, just to get seen a little bit faster. So agents kind of can be notoriously very slow, and just to do anything that kind of prods them to looking a little bit quicker is helpful. And then trust your gut. So I actually had an offer from one of the biggest agencies who really wanted me to change fundamentally a lot about the book and make it more about the guy's perspective battling depression. And I felt strongly, this is a woman's story. She is dating someone with depression, and mental health is a big aspect of the story. But let's not take it away from her and give it to, the guy's perspective. I felt strongly about that. So the agent that I signed with was smaller, had, sold some, but definitely not as many. She hadn't sold to film before, things like that I knew that there were some trade-offs involved, but I just got such a good feeling of just her energy and her vision for it. And honestly, the speed that she kept getting back to me with, which I think is something to look for as well. So like I said, don't sign the contract without doing your diligence or feel rushed into making a fast decision. Don't sign with an agent whose vision just isn't aligned with yours. This is your book, and the agents should help you feel like they're just going to help you make it more of you and not take it into their direction. Don't sign with anyone who is asking you to pay them. So just upfront, agents earn 15% royalties from all of that they only make money after the book is out. They only make money from your royalties. You should never have to pay them a retainer. You should never have to pay them any kind of fee if they are a credible literary agent.
We had a couple of questions come through. For a nonfiction book, do you have to have the proposal finished before contacting agents, or do agents help you with the proposal? I ask this because I've seen book coaches that focus on creating the book proposal, and I want to make sure my proposal is as strong as possible, but I'm not sure if I will need coaching for that part of the process.
Yeah, it's a good question. I actually work with authors as well on their proposals, and it is important for it to be as polished as possible because you kind of do have one chance with the agents. The agents are not interested in helping you develop your idea or your marketing strategy. What they'll do is elevate it, translate it a little bit into the language that the editors speak. But they want it to be as strong as possible. So I do think, do your research on these book coaches, because I looked at a lot when I was going through it, and a lot of them, it can be a money-making scheme. So make sure that they themselves have actually had track record, like ask the tough questions to them as you would ask an agent, and make sure that the pricing is reasonable, I would say. But if you are really, wanting a support system to help your proposal get as polished as possible, I think that could be a good investment, because your proposal is really as important as a manuscript when you're approaching agents.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
And another question, what's a break clause?
Sorry. Yeah. So a break clause is, so my agent had, after 1 year, if she hadn't sold the book, I would be able to leave, and you're not tethered to them. So basically I gave her 1 year and said, in this year, I can't take this book to any other agents. You have full rights to be pitching it. And again, she's not making any money in that year. I'm not paying her, but we are agreeing to work together and to give her that chance, because it can take many months to get a book deal, even after you have an agent. So that's just what to look for, is when could you leave if it's not working out? Because there are a lot of stories I know from people who sign with agents and then it just doesn't work out, and then they end up taking it elsewhere before they get their deal.
Great. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so you have an agent, now what? And this is just a little diagram on the publishing process and timeline. Again, speed to market is not what the traditional publishing industry is known for. So it can take a long time. Sign with an agent, and then your agent will go through your manuscript, will give you comments on it. If it's fiction, if it's nonfiction, they'll go through your proposal and they'll say, okay, start writing, like, let's put together an outline together. They'll be involved in the outline process, but you'll be the one writing. So I would say if the manuscript is already done, this process, this initial sign with the agent and write and revise might be a little bit faster. If you're actually writing the manuscript from the proposal, then that might be a little bit longer. But traditionally, even with business books, like usually your agent will say, we're actually just going to, maybe we'll add a few more sample chapters, but we don't need the book to be final before we start pitching the publishers. So once you have written and revised in accordance with what your agent wants for your proposal or your manuscript, then they go out on submission. What this means is that your agent has put together a list of 5 to 10 ideal editors at the publishing houses who they think would be a good fit. So, we actually, for my book, we did not get an offer on the first round. We actually made some revisions afterwards, after the first round of feedback. And then she went out again and we got a deal on the second round. It took about 6 months. No, it took about 8 months after I signed with my agent to get the deal. A month or two of that was the revision process, a few months, and then the rest of it was kind of the first round of pitching, small revisions, next round of pitching, and then we got an offer. Even after you get an offer, it can still be 1 to 2 years until your book comes to market, sometimes even longer. So a little bit more into how landing a book deal works. So again, once you and your agent have your final polished manuscript or your proposal, your agent will go out on submission. Then you will revise perhaps. And then once you have an offer from an editor, you get on a Zoom, kind of do the whole feel each other out from both sides thing. One thing to know and to keep in mind from the start, and it's why connections are not that helpful. I didn't have any connections, so shouldn't say they're not helpful. I'm sure they are, but connections won't take you all the way, because even if you know an editor, they have to get their whole acquisitions team on board. So what that means is all the other editors, or there has to be a consensus amongst the editorial team. The sales and marketing team has to be aligned on it. You know, it goes really all the way up the chain. So while it's a great thing to have an editor be interested, that does not necessarily guarantee that. Like, I had a couple editors who loved the book, but didn't end up having the power to get it through. And so that's a little bit frustrating, but just kind of good to be aware of. And then make sure you're asking your editor kind of similar questions that you asked your agent, but a little bit more on kind of the actual editorial vision for the book. So where do you see this sitting on a shelf? What is the hook in your editor's eyes? It might be a little bit different from how you pitched it in the query. Would this be a lead title? So what a lead title is one that your publisher is prioritizing and putting more marketing and PR behind it than some of the others. When would it publish? And what I would say is, when you're just meeting for the first time with this editor, it'll be you, your agent, the editor on the call. Keep it focused on the content and the book. I wouldn't get into the nitty-gritty of the economics with the editor. You can have those conversations with your agent. Once the editor sends over a contract to the agent, dive in, negotiate up, do whatever, to get the best terms as you can. But don't kind of distract from the initial excitement of just them loving your book and the content of your book, because that is really the most important thing for them to be able to make you an offer. So I wouldn't want you kind of like shooting yourself in the foot by not getting that on the table. Because another thing is, if you get an offer on the table and say it's not the best one, again, you can use that as leverage for another one. So focus on getting the offer, then dive in, figure out what points you want to negotiate. Like I said, my percent royalties is pretty small. Like it's 10%, which is, it's kind of standard, but it's still on the low side. And for a book that sells for $17, I get 10%, but 15% of that goes to my agent. I only make, $1.50 off of the book. Again, why I said that this was for me not going to be my lead revenue and salary. That was not kind of the goal of it as much as just getting my foot in the door and being able to go through the great distribution of Penguin Random House. Figure out what points you want to negotiate. So we, for example, negotiated to keep the film rights. And that was something that was really important to me because I want it to be made into a movie. And I do actually have movie and TV agents, which is a separate point. But basically, once the book was done and in the pre-production phase, my agent shared it with some of the Hollywood agencies. And actually one of the biggest ones picked it up. So they're going to start pitching it more after the book comes out. And it kind of depends on how well the book does at launch and how much buzz it gets a little bit to see if they pick it up. It's very low probability, but that's also something to have in mind. If that's something you want, make sure that you're not giving your rights away, because the publisher will try to keep everything and they will do nothing to help you get a movie deal. Okay, so bringing your book to market as an entrepreneur. So again, this is really kind of where we can shine, I think, in the Dreamers and Doers Collective and bring our business savvy. And the way I look at it and the way I was kind of approaching it, from everything I had talked with so many people who had been through it in the art and author world, as well as on the more business side of things. And I just thought, okay, I'm not actually going to expect my sales and marketing team to do that much. Like anything they do will be bonus, because the number of people who, even going through some of the biggest publishing houses, if you're a debut author, everyone's usually very disappointed in what the publisher ends up doing and getting for them. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to really just approach this as an authorpreneur and bring this to market and find creative ways to engage with my target audience and look at whatever the publisher does as bonus. But if you're relying on, a lot of authors will kind of just step back once they've written a book and they get the book deal and they say, oh, my work is done, pass it off to the marketing and sales team. And that is not a recipe for success in the old-fashioned book world, because it is really that their conversion is very low for just the kind of the placements they're able to get you and just the conversion and brand name breaking in as a debut. So some ways that I try to do this are thinking, okay, my target audience, are women ages, originally I was thinking more like 25 to 45. I actually kind of through anecdotal and survey research found that it skewed a little bit younger to women in college being really interested in kind of what the Wall Street business world is like. The woman works on Wall Street and she's navigating all of that. So it's almost like a big sister character they can look up to. And they're really interested also just in my story of how I started there. And then I have made this creative leap. So I started going to different events at Michigan Ross Business School, the undergrad, University of Chicago I was just at last week, Dartmouth, my alma mater, and, being able to give something and offer, and I think that's something we're also so good here, is saying, how can you lift up, your target audience and also engage them and also bring brand awareness to your book and to your business. Also, this has been kind of a boot camp in brand partnerships. So for example, my launch party is being sponsored by 3 women-owned businesses, including 2 in Dreamers and Doers, who are aligned in terms of their audiences and their themes. They focus on wellness, on love, on finance. These are the key themes of the book and key themes that my target audience are going to be aligned with. So really just looking at it as kind of bootstrapping a fundraising process, and bringing in more of that just holistic business sense into the traditional book world, which is not something my publisher and PR team they're all supportive of it, but for them it's kind of a foreign language. So they say, go for it, Lindsay. It's not really something that they would think to do on their own. And I think it's a great opportunity for us to get creative. And then also what I have found, I decided not to hire, actually the reason I joined Dreamers and Doers, I was doing my diligence on all of these PR, traditional book publicists, et cetera, $5,000 a month for 6 months, $30K for a book campaign. They have no guarantees of placements. They have no guarantee of sales. And I felt kind of throwing money down the drain. And I thought, wait, what if I can align myself with, more just creative, entrepreneurs who are also then, helping raise visibility and place with media and stuff. And I've already gotten, I think probably more through here than I would have gotten through the traditional ones. But also don't be afraid to just pitch directly, absolutely take full advantage of the Dreamers and Doers community. And then just kind of like I just pitched Business Insider directly, and I have a piece coming out with them. I was able to do a TEDx talk about how love is not a business deal. So again, think like, what are the big themes of your book? And rather than necessarily making it all about the book, how can you get pieces and placements that speak to those themes that really are elevating you and your personal brand, and then will lead into the book. But I think people kind of don't necessarily just want books pushed in their face as a direct marketing tactic all the time. So finding subtle ways. So for me, the Business Insider piece is about my personal jump from Wall Street to being an author. So the book comes out, but it's more about my personal story. Understand the mechanics of bestseller lists, which are infuriatingly opaque, and not every sale actually counts. Not every sale is created equal. I could do an entire other thing on that. But understand, are you going for a list? Which one would you be going for? How are you strategically going to funnel your sales to reach that goal? And optimize your pre-order period. So, every book that is ordered for me before June 10th, I guess June 11th, the book comes out on the 7th. And then at the end of that week, sales are tallied for the first week of the book. That includes 6 months of pre-orders. So, you could have bought my book now for the past 6 months, and all of those pre-order sales actually count for week 1. So that's why when you see people making lists, it's usually that first week, just because it gives them more time to be able to reach those certain thresholds. So those are kind of just some of the practical things that I have found, even the best agents, editors, and publishers not to be very well versed on. So, then think about supplementary products related to your book. So I do coaching services for authors, for women in college, women in business, and, monetize and build your brand, and think of the book really as one pillar to that, but don't necessarily rely on it to pay all of your bills, as we have discussed. Okay, so just the last thing, getting started. How do you actually take your first steps, hold yourself accountable, start the pitching process, and really go after it? And I think it's a few things. I think carving out this sacred time in your routine, for me, was just the most helpful. So it was waking up, 5 a.m. and going to the Starbucks across from Goldman and working from 6 to 9 every morning, unless I had a really good excuse, chipping away day by day. And also, finding community and accountability. So I did every workshop available at Dartmouth, but even in New York, I did a couple of writers' workshops, not anything even that expensive or fancy. I did the New York Writers, or the YMCA on the Upper West Side. I did a New York Writers Workshop Conference. And I don't know, I had mixed feelings about that. I think I had the benefit of having been in an intense workshop setting for many years. So it's almost like therapy, where you go for a while with the hope that then you can hear that voice in your head and you train yourself. So I think having a few years of deep immersion and workshop is invaluable. And then you might get to a point where you're kind of hearing that voice and critique in your head, and might not need it in the workshop setting as much, but it can be really helpful, especially if you are, wanting accountability, whether it be a proposal or a manuscript. Think ahead with your platform and your audiences. So I actually started a poetry Instagram account a few years ago at the same time I was starting this manuscript. The book has a lot of poetry in it. The protagonist wants to leave corporate and go be a poet. And for me, it's been a great way to kind of test even certain styles and things, and have a highly engaged group that I can go to market with now. Network and learn from other authors. So if you're in New York, you have a little bit of a leg up just from going to all kinds of book launches and poetry readings, and look on at whatever is happening on, I would just Google events happening this weekend for authors or writers. But also if you're not, just reach out to your network, use me as a resource. I'll think of, others. And we really, I think, have so many, even in Dreamers and Doers, who've been through this process. And I personally found that to be extremely helpful from an emotional and practical standpoint. Don't take rejections personally. Find that balance between pivoting based on feedback and staying true to who you are. It's not always going to happen overnight, which leads into being both patient and persistent. They're not mutually exclusive. Be patient and kind of, don't expect it to happen overnight. Having said that, keep hustling as if you want it to almost. That's a balance that I never feel perfectly aligned with, but it is really important. And then finally, tap into your inner child and have some fun. And remember that this really should be a fun and proud moment when you can hold your book in your hands and say, we did this, and thank everyone and celebrate together. Like, I am having so much fun bringing it back to my hometown and sharing it with old high school teachers and people who have been part of the journey the whole way through. So that is all that I have, really. And then I just kind of offering a discounted coaching service for anyone in this community. If you are working on your proposal or manuscript, I work with aspiring authors, just again, based on all of my experience over the past decade and the wins and losses. So, would be more than happy to chat with you more if you want to send me a note, and we can help you reach all of your goals. So thank you so much, Hannah and group. And I just want to open up the last few minutes for any additional questions that we didn't catch in the chat.
Yeah, so we actually have several questions in the chat. So I'm just going to start from the top and we'll just see how far we get.
Awesome.
This is amazing. So I'm just going to dive in. Do agents help you get quotes from others about your book for fiction books?
The publishers do, the editors there, they do, but then also tap your own network. And I actually have Katie Couric supporting mine, which I just got, but I got that myself. So the biggest one so far, I have not gotten through them, but they do. Like, they got a couple of USA Today and New York Times authors to read and blurb. It's called a blurb, but it doesn't actually correlate with sales much. And it's kind of one of those hoity-toity things that I wouldn't say to overly, unless it's someone huge. I think a lot of that is kind of BS. Like friends, like people doing favors for people without even reading the book. So, yeah.
If you know you would want to hire a ghostwriter for a memoir, do you hire that before or after an agent proposal?
Memoir is tough. What I don't want to see happen to you is you hire a ghostwriter and you pay them, I don't know, 20, 30K more. And then you get to pitching your agent and they're not interested. So I would probably start with the proposal and see if you get traction, and even, maybe hire someone to help you with a chapter or two. But I think unless you have unlimited funds and time, it might not make sense for you to get a ghostwriter to do the full thing. If agents get back and say, hey, we'd be interested, but we need to see the full, fine. But I would temperature check it with agents with kind of the minimum viable product, if you will, before going and making that decision.
Next question. I have multiple ideas for books I want to write. Would a book agent give feedback on which concept they think would be more viable before starting on the proposals?
Probably not. It's very difficult to get agents time. I even try to introduce my agents to some people. They won't do Zooms. They won't do calls. They will look at emails, but they're probably not going to weigh in. And that's where kind of this book coaching and writing coaching industry is more coming. And that's where I felt the biggest challenge. And that's why I try to help authors in that space before they get the agents, because just getting an agent's attention is really difficult unless you have a personal connection.
How does the marketing work? Are they evaluating book deals based on number of followers, etc.? Are they creating marketing plans for you, or is that something you do on your own?
It's a combo. Like I said, they kind of do the bare minimum on their own, and they have a little bit of formula of, Instagram and Facebook ads or certain book clubs they're connected with. But for the most part, I have my spreadsheets and I have what I'm tracking on my own to come up with that. So I would say you'll be able to talk with them. You'll be able to ask what their plan is, and then you can really try and fill in gaps. They do influencer marketing a little bit. But on top of that, I supplemented it by reaching out and sending more ARCs, advanced reader copies, to bookstagrammers, book talkers, etc. So they have their kind of basic list, and then you would add on top of that.
Awesome. So we have just about a minute left. I want to be mindful of your time, Lindsay. There are several more questions here, but we just cannot get through all of them. But this was recorded. We will be sharing the recording in Dreamers and Doers. So hopefully that will help.
Please send me emails or DMs with those questions and I will get to them. I know I was rushing through a lot of content and trying to give you as much of a 101 as possible in this hour, but absolutely reach out with anything else.
Thank you so much for offering that. So yeah, everyone who didn't get your questions answered, there's so many great questions. I mean, I think we could sit here for another hour. But this was amazing. Thank you, Lindsay, for just, giving us this behind the scenes look into this process. I can tell how much hard work went into it. So I'm super excited for your book to come out so soon. And thank you everyone for joining today and, just showing up and asking such great questions. I'm going to drop a quick feedback form in the chat. If you have any feedback on today's session, we'd love to hear it. But yeah, this was so amazing. It was such an honor to learn alongside everyone.
Thank you so much, Hannah, and everyone. Looking forward to keeping the conversation going.
Definitely. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.